Yeah, when I do the video, talk about it. Wherever you want.
Hey guys. Welcome, thanks for coming. We're gonna stand here. You guys can look back and forth. Brian's got a mic, so don't worry if you can't hear me.
Hold on.
All right, so our speaker today has had a really exciting career. He started out as an account exec at Wieden Kennedy in Portland, and he later was a copywriter for Nike there. He moved on to work and helped launch the Corona's Find Your Beach campaign. He eventually moved client side to Carhartt, where he is now the Vice President, Executive Creative Director. He's overseen the brand through a lot of changes and staying relevant as culture and the definition of hard work kind of changes through time. Carhartt's been around for about 130 years, and we've seen it. Okay, is that better? Carhartt's been around for about 130 years, and Brian has seen it through some really cool projects. He's worked on overseeing the Carhartt women's line and redesigning it to kind of more incorporate the modern day craftswoman. He also wrote the All Hail the Carhartt Woman campaign. He's worked on some really cool collaborations, including a beer that Carhartt came out with New Holland Brewery in Michigan, as well as working with celebrity director and huge Carhartt fan Jason Momoa more recently. So we're going to hear about all that and some more. If you guys just want to give Brian Bennett a big welcome.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me from here? Okay. Great. So I'll kind of pace and move around since I'm kind of an ADD kid who can't sit still anyway, so this is perfect for me. One, thank you so much for having me. I've heard about VCU since probably the first day I got to Wieden Kennedy. Gianna Jenkins was a guy who went to school here that was an immediate first influence on me. I was his account exec. We had the same birthday, we had the same taste in many things, despite being guys from really two different sides of town. So that was sort of an early, for me, learning about what made this place special. I actually have an editor now back in Chicago who I just left for the week, who's editing our fall TV spot. He also is an editor who came out of VCU. So over the years, I've periodically met characters who came through here, and I've always really respected where they came from and how they learned, and it's a real honor for me to be here. And in fact, some of them even laugh to think that I'm talking here today, so I appreciate that. I've heard a couple things from some people who asked me to speak. They said, hey, you'd be great to talk because you've been an account exec, you've been a creative. At Carhartt, at half the time, I'm more of our strategist and our producer than I am a creative director. I've heard you're great to talk to because I've taught school before. I've taught at Chicago Portfolio School, and I also never went to school. And so admittingly, in my younger age, I used to have a big envy of kids who went to ad schools. And to be perfectly honest, I kind of didn't like you because I thought you had this crazy advantage over me because I didn't have that. So people who went to school always just made me want to work that much harder. I always said I'm kind of a walk-on in the advertising world. I appreciate that because I've learned it doesn't matter where you come from. I lost you, Bruce. There it is. Sorry. So, basically, like all of you, we're all really busy people. I've known I was going to speak here for probably 6 months, and on the plane ride to Oregon last week, I started thinking about what the hell am I going to tell these kids that's going to help them out. And so I was in Oregon last week filming our fall TV spot. We filmed this beautiful blue truck. I will say one of the perks of being a creative director is you can be that D-bag who stops production to ask if the photographer can shoot you in the truck because you look super cool and you want to update your Instagram page. This isn't intentionally me making fun of myself. Their Instagram actually made me take it down because when I took my glasses off, they said there was too much blue steel for the so that photo is no longer up. So anyway, this is kind of my road, and I think, you know, all of the things I talked about, like, all the different reasons why I'm here, my experiences, be it client side, be it working at agencies, more than anything, the one thing I offer you is to be, I want to show you how I've tried to be myself through this 17-year journey that I've been on. That's really all I know how to do, and with that, I decided maybe there's a couple rules that I've been following. So, the first one is you will never get ahead by yourself. The second one is make ideas about stuff you love. The third one is never forget how you got here. The fourth one is screw rules, be stupid, perfect apologizing. I hate rules, so there's no brand guideline at Carhartt. When I got there, I tried to change the font, and this junior art director was like, "You can't do that." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Well, because our brand guideline said that we can't do it." And I'm like, "Well, who makes the brand guideline?" She's like, "We do." I'm like, "Well, then we can do whatever we want, so don't show me a brand guideline anymore." I've since learned from some really good designers we need a brand guideline, so I'm not saying that's the only answer. So let me tell you about sort of the beginning, the most impactful person that I met in my advertising career. That if you haven't heard about him, I'm going to ask you to Google him and look him up. So I'm the young kid on the left. As my wife said to me yesterday, "Man, you've been drinking a lot of beer over the last 16 years." Mike Byrne is the guy on the right. Ironically, I'm a huge Chicago Blackhawks fan, but we went snowboarding up in, we were working on something for Nike for ESPN, and he said we have to go snowboarding in hockey jerseys. That sounded pretty stupid to me, but we did it anyway, and it was fun, so that's why I'm in a hockey jersey. So Mike was the first guy I met at White & Kennedy. We started literally on the first day, and I could tell right away I liked him just by his demeanor. You know, there was just something very warm about him, very inviting. You know, he asked me what my name was, where I was from. I'm from the south side of Chicago. He was from Philly. We both learned that we both went to, you know, Irish Catholic high schools. We both loved sports. And I was like, "This is great. We're going to be working together. What do you do?" And he's like, "Well, I'm a writer." He'd already established himself at White & Kennedy, New York, on ESPN. He had just moved to start his journey on Nike. And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to write too. I'd love to write ads with you." And he's like, "What's your position again?" I'm like, "Well, I'm this junior assistant to the assistant account executive." And he's like, "You're not going to write any ads. You're going to get coffee and you're going to write Excel sheets about budgets." And I was like, "Well, yeah, I know I got to do that, but I want to write the ads too." And so, you know, lucky for me, he was a guy that also started as an account exec in Philly before he went to the circus in Atlanta. And so he just kind of took a soft spot to me, and he kind of took me under his wing. And he still, to this day, we still work on projects together. And, you know, so the biggest thing I tell you guys is, like, wherever that person is that you want to be like, you know, find out if, you know, maybe you're working with them now, maybe you're going to work with them someday, maybe you don't know him yet. I didn't pick Mike Byrne because he was an ad guy. I picked him because I liked him. I also picked him because he liked me. You know, this whole thing's about relationships. You know, I started learning early when he'd come down to my office with his assignments, and he was asking me for insights about stuff, about why did I feel this way, and what do you think about this idea. He needed my opinion as much as I needed his opinion. And, you know, this thing isn't a two-way street. You know, you can, even if you're the lowest on the totem pole, and the highest on the totem pole is there, you can still come in and influence them. You know, and you don't have to both be Irish Catholic and love hockey. You know, you can find your differences, your similarities and your differences. I mean, I'll be honest, we are probably the best thing about us is we love to argue with each other all the time we'll argue over the color of that red brick. And so, you know, that's been something that I learned early, was you really need to find people that will help you get there. And Mike really always has. He's been a huge influence for me. He now runs Anomaly in New York. When I got to Carhartt, he was the first call I made, and I said, I'm going to do this thing on my own, but I want to build my own team here, but I want to keep working with you. I'm going to give you a project a year so we keep working together. And a lot of people ask me, what is it like to have, an agency from the inside? There's no difference. The big difference is I get to make what I want inside the house, but then I go look for other really talented, creative people outside of the house. In the same way an agency would hire a freelance producer, I go hire or freelance creative or producer. I hire agencies per project because I always want other people's opinions to help me shape this thing called Carhartt. So I'll give you a demonstration of where Mike really helped me out. This is, the only Just Do It ad I ever wrote. It's so amazing you can't even read it, but I'll read it for you. The gist of it is I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I love the White Sox. As you know, maybe if you love baseball, in 2005, the White Sox broke a curse from 1919. They won the World Series. So I wrote an ad, and I'll just read it to you. All right. So this aired on the back page of the Sun-Times the day before the World Series. I called Nike. I left White & Kennedy. I was freelancing for them in Chicago. Nike started asking me, hey, just start doing work for us in Chicago as a writer, as a producer, as a creative. And I just called them up and said, look, you guys, Chicago's such a Cubs town. Everyone knows that if you're from there. I said, you're really missing out. Like, there's a whole little world here that really is excited about the White Sox. And so I said, I wrote this ad and I go, all I want is 2 tickets to the World Series. I don't even want to be paid for it. So they're like, okay. So for those of you who can't read the back, I'll read it. There are 2 baseball teams in Chicago. One is loved not just in Chicago, but nationally. A fan base as far and wide as this country is great. Then you have this other team in the South Side, whose fan base is just the South Side. The South Side White Sox are not a popular team. You don't see kids wearing their baseball caps in New York and LA and London. They're blue collar, nothing fancy, no frills, just a bunch of small ballers and outcasts that found a home on the other side of town. They're a team of the people, and that's the way they play, with all heart and more heart, and just when you think they've given you all the heart they have, they give you a little more. That's the South Side for you. So when you're watching the series, you're not just watching a baseball team, you're witnessing the collective soul of a few 100,000 people on one side of town. The world meet the South Side White Sox. So there's a couple interesting things about this ad, for me. One, anyone who knows me and knew that ad, this was like me getting to do an ad about where I was from, they're like, oh my God, that's exactly you, that's your voice, only you could have written that. In fairness, I did write it. I think there's a better version of this that was here, that I shared with Nike. And to be honest, they didn't like it. So all of a sudden this thing that the one Nike Chicago client loved, who was from Chicago and really wanted to run it, all of a sudden they were like, we're not going to run it. We don't like it. This is Nike Portland, because Nike Portland didn't understand sometimes how regionally important things were. Luckily for me, Mike Byrne was out in Portland. He was the executive creative director of Nike Global at the time. I called him up. Mike, you got to call Nike and tell them to run this ad. Okay, I will. So he called me back. Man, I just can't sell it. And I said, why? They said, they're idiots. This is the best ad they could ever write. Anyone I'd ever shared with in Chicago cried when they read it. So he's like, look, they're going to let you do it, but we got to rewrite it. And I was really freaking stubborn about it. I was really pissed. Because who are a bunch of Portland people going to tell me what the White Sox are all about? So luckily for me, Mike and I rewrote it. And Mike helped me get it into a place that he knew would sell with them. And it taught me so many things. And he said to me in the moment, Brian, yeah, it's a great idea, but it doesn't matter. Like, you got to have another great idea. He's like, do you want to walk away from this because you're so mad you can't sell your main idea? Or do you want to take this great insight that you had and let's take another shot at it? you know, and so we did. And, you know, it was funny, him and I we got in a fight about it. I was so mad he couldn't sell my original one, you know, and in the end, yeah, do I think the other one's better? Maybe, but it didn't see the light of day. The one that I needed help with did. And it was a huge lesson. It helps me a lot when I'm really struggling on an idea and you can't sell something. You can't give up, because there's no idea that's the best idea in the world. There's always another one. There's always another one. You know, he was the one who taught me the baseball reference. He's like, good baseball teams don't win without a bullpen. Do not be that starting pitcher who thinks he can go the whole game every time. You have to have more ideas. You have to have more people behind you. And I really watched a lot of really good creatives die on the cross for stuff that I wish they would just shut up and go back to the drawing board, because they're really talented people. And I do it today, you know, occasionally too, but I'm so glad I have this example that knocks my head out of it and reminds me that there's another idea that can work. And so that was a huge lesson for me very early about how to sell ideas. So the woman who was the Nike client, who I wrote that for in Chicago, she left and went to run Kobe Bryant Inc. Kobe, you know, when he had retired, he's getting in all sorts of other stuff. I don't know if any of you guys have seen, he won an Oscar last year. So funny story, that White Sox ad, she used to run Nike Chicago, that White Sox ad sits behind her desk in a frame. It's one of her favorite ads ever. So when Kobe went to retire, there's a thing called the Players Tribune. Hopefully you guys are familiar with it. It's a really great site where players get to talk about who they are. When he was retiring, he wrote a letter that was a really it was an angry, bitter letter about him leaving basketball. And Andrea Fairchild was his, you know, she ran, you know, she was like kind of his brand manager at Kobe Inc. And she said, look, I just think you think about a guy who was about to retire. He was bitter. A 20-year career was coming to an end. His body was breaking down on him. So she said, look, you got to help me. He's going to release this letter in one day. And I keep telling him, like, it's in the wrong space. And she said, you know, I've tried to talk him out of it, and I used your White Sox ad as an example. I showed him the heart you had in that, and how you empathetically tried to rally the people around you. And he really liked it. And he goes, so who wrote that? And she's like, I know him. So she called me up, and I'm duck hunting in Oklahoma. This is irony at its finest. I'm it's like 4 a.m, and I love that one of the world's greatest basketball players is relying on some white kid in Oklahoma to help edit his retirement speech while I'm duck hunting. So she sent me what he wrote. It was really good. Kobe's a really smart guy. He's very intelligent. He's a great writer. But it reminded me so much of that thing back to where I was with Mike Byrne. It just needed someone to help him shift it. And the biggest advice that I gave him and helped him write it was, I just said, write this more from the perspective of you as the kid than you as the adult. So be the kid that we want to root for instead of the adult who's reflecting on his life. Be the kid who's talking about his life. And so, you know, to his credit, he took my advice. He let me edit it where I saw fit. I sent it back to them. There was no contract to do this. I did this as a favor to Andrea Fairchild. She called me the next day and said, we're running it. They ran it on Dear Basketball. I've heard things like it was the most read poem of all time because of the nature of him, you know, because you think of globally what he is as an athlete. I watched, you know, people from Oxford say it's the worst poem of all time. I watched the New York Times and Rolling Stone say it's amazing. This thing was, when he retired, this was a very highly debated thing. And what I said was, measure this thing for what it's worth. This is a guy who's retiring from basketball. How many young kids will it teach to write, to express themselves, to understand their career? I don't care about anyone. I don't care about some guy from Oxford who wants to break down this thing as a poem. I could give a shit. He's not an inner city kid playing basketball who needs hope. You know, so, you know, I really blinded out all the criticism that I had, you know, and that I saw. You know, I think a lot of people get really uncomfortable when athletes start expressing their opinions. We're certainly living in that time right now with Nike. So it was an interesting experience. So that's all I did. I helped him out on that occasion. I did not know, well, I did know a little bit because I've worked with him on some other projects. And he said, hey, I'm going to turn this thing into an animated short. And I said, that's great, good for you. And then he asked me to help out on some other projects. And then one day I get an email like, do you know that animated short's nominated for an Oscar? And then like, all of a sudden, it won the Oscar. Luckily for me, everyone says, did you get an Oscar? I got a special thanks in the end of the film. I'm accredited with the Oscar, but more importantly, my aunt went to the mall and made me an Oscar, because only Kobe Bryant gets the Oscar, and you know what, deservedly so. And what I would say about him, to his credit, he didn't need to thank me in this. There was no reason to do that. We did this all sort of, I had no contract with him. But again, it gets back to that original point. Even Kobe Bryant can't get there on his own. If you look at who made that film, it was an incredible Oscar-winning. Glenn, the guy who scored it, has won 34 Oscars. Kobe's very, very intelligent, knows how to surround himself around other smart people. He's very driven by finding creative people that are different than him and helping them out. And so it was nice to see that idea of helping someone out, work its way through my career. The last thing I'll say about Mike Byrne is this came out. This is a campaign they created for Diesel, and I'm going to leave the case study for you guys. It's my favorite case study. Mike called me. This was, I was back after I was at Wyden. I went back to Chicago and was working in the Chicago agency scene, and he sent me this deck that he was pitching to Diesel, and he said, I want you to read something, and he said, it reminds me of you. And then I look at the first page and it's like, be stupid. And I was like, oh, I think this is a compliment, but I'm not sure. But I would say if there's anything that's ever had an impact on my life that told me to be me, it was definitely, this deck told me many of the decisions that I made were right, and many things that I'm worried about now, I should push through it and continue to be myself. The reason he called me and said, he's like, look, I go, well, why did this campaign make me think of you? And he goes, you moved to Portland, Oregon with no job. You had, a puppy. You had $500 in your bank account, and you had a piece of shit Jeep Wrangler that you always called me to help you jump because it was broken. He's like, that's just really stupid. That's not an educated decision. And I think if you start, and I was like, okay, thank you for making fun of me, but where does this get good? Let me jump to the case study. I think there's just some brilliant lines written in there. Youth are like balloons, they're filled with dreams, hopes, and the fervent belief that anything is possible. They are told again and again, a million times over, don't be stupid. The cruel retort to thinking big, to thinking different, to doing something probably long overdue is being done. Stupid is the relentless pursuit of a regret-free life. The world is full of smart people. Ask around. There are all kinds of people doing all kinds of smart things with other smart people. Each one smarter than the last. That's smart, and it bores the hell out of us. We're with stupid, and we think we're probably pretty stupid too. At least we hope so. That's why we're here. As far as we can tell, the stupid are the only ones carrying the banner of interesting. Smart may have the brains, but stupid has the balls. The stupid aren't afraid to fail. Why? Smart may have plans, but stupid has the stories. Smart may be the authority, but stupid has one hell of a hangover. Because they are stupid. Stupid creates, stupid critiques. If you want to do something that's never been done before, don't go to the guy with the spreadsheet and the blueprints. Go to the guy with the imagination and the weed. The stupid are the only ones brave enough to do what no one in their right mind would do. Because the stupid know there are worse things than failure. Like not even trying. So you get it. I hope. Just flip through this. Just some great writing in here. So I gotta tell you, is that, it's one thing to be a 22-year-old kid who moves out to Oregon and you try to be stupid. Now I'm 43 and I've got 3 kids and a mortgage, traveling soccer and football teams to pay for and school and whatnot. And I'm terrified every day I'll stop making stupid decisions because everything around me tells me to make the practical choice. I'll tell you, the most recent stupid decision I made was actually coming here. Catherine called me at 6, 7 o'clock and said, school's canceled, there's a hurricane here. I'm getting on a flight at 7:30, I'm looking at the weather, I'm like, I'm flying into a hurricane for a free speech. What am I thinking? That's pretty stupid. And I will tell you, the landing was my top 3 worst landings of all time. Having said that, I'm really glad I'm here. The smart choice was to stay home. So, again, that's why Mike Byrne has been that person who's meant a lot to me, who's either made me a better writer, he's made me a better person, he's made me a better father, better husband. So find that person, however you can, and remember it's not a two-way street. There's plenty that you can give back. Okay, I think you're ready for rule number 2. So rule number 2, pretty easy. Make ideas about stuff you love. Do you guys know, I'm sure you're all aware of every brand has a consumer profile, right? Of who their target is, right? Do you guys know that? So I bet Nike calls him Jimmy, and he plays basketball, and he's great at Fortnite, and blah, blah, blah. So you get that, right? So I'm in the interview at Carhartt 7 years ago, and I'm listening to this woman speak who creates the profiles. And she tells me Carhartt's profile is Mike. That's our guy. Mike is 30 to 45, he's blah, 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 everything you know about Carhartt. He likes beer, he can swing an axe. His wife's probably mad at him right now because he's still at the bar. You get it. He's just your average Carhartt guy, right? He's a guy that helped build America in some way, shape, or form. So I'm in the interview and I'm chomping at the bit because I'm loaded with mics. I'm surrounded by mics. I just told you about Mike Byrne. We'll get to my father in rule 3. He's Mike as well. But let me show you the 4 mics here that I've already put in Carhartt ads. So on the left is the top left corner is my son. That's Michael Bennett. Classic other D-bag creative director move to put your kid in the ads, but he's a cute kid, so I don't care. The kid on the right of him with the gun, that's as you guys know, Carhartt's been around 130 years. A couple years ago, we told our heritage story. We made pants for World War I. So I was up filming in Newfoundland, and one of the things very important to me is that we're always super authentic about everyone we shoot is always real people. So once in a while, we have these things like this because it relied on characters. We were like, well, listen, if we're going to shoot people, we recreated a battle scene from World War I. I'm like, if we're going to recreate a battle scene, I want all Marines and military to be the soldiers. And so I got to call my brother Michael up, who's a Chicago policeman, and say, get up to Newfoundland, I'll pay for your flight. I need you to just sit and fake shoot people. And he did, he came up. That's my wife's Uncle Mike on the left, lower left. He's a Chicago fireman, and he is he fixes bridges, he's a steel worker, he's an iron worker. So one of the first things I did was shoot him for one of our, I have to always go asset collect and get photos for all of our seasons. And so I can tell you that shooting, and the things for me that are really hard to film are like oil rigs and bridges. They don't want anybody filming on oil rigs and bridges. It's just dangerous, right? So it was in classic Chicago fashion. I met him in an alley where I gave guys cash in Carhartt, and they snuck me and the photographer up on this beautiful bridge, and we shot there all day. The guy on the lower right is my godfather and almost a second father to me. That's Mike Moran. He's my uncle. He's my mom's youngest brother. So imagine me being in the interview when they're trying to tell me who Mike is. And you know, the thing I would say is, like, people always say, oh my God, you're so lucky that you get to work at Carhartt. And I hate when people say you're lucky. Because I would rather think about things like destiny. I think I've been on a collision course to find this brand probably my whole life. You know, and it took me till I was 35 to find it. So, you know, I get a lot of young ad kids who are like, how'd you get there? I mean, I want to get there now. It's like, well, you may be 16 years away from it. You know, there's a great quote I love, that if you want something more than life, the whole world conspires to see that you get it. And I think a lot of times that getting to Carhartt was that happening for me. But also, I've always made stuff about things that I love. I mean, it might make me, you know, I don't know if it contains how dimensional I am as a creative. I'm just not interested in making ideas about things I don't care about. I'm not interested in making ideas that don't let me look at the world right around me. I mean, I would ask any one of you here, I hope the majority of you say this, what's the one thing you love more than anything? What is it? Can anyone answer? What is the one thing you love more than anything? I'll send a Carhartt beanie to the first person who gets it.
Family?
Right. So your family. They could be moronic like mine is. They can be really funny. They could be goofy. They can be normal, boring. But you spend an awful lot of time around these people. You know, so I would rather just look at them and watch them and think about stuff about them. And I don't like, I mean, I'm not against make-believe. I love having imagination, but the Father is always right in front of me. And so, you know, family and friends, I put a lot of family and friends in my ads. And I can say with a pretty straight face, I've never done it unauthentically. I've done it because that person is this character that I'm looking for. And so, you know, when I thought about reflecting back a little bit of my career, I know how clear it is that I'm doing it at Carhartt. I wanted to go back and look at my old portfolio, which I haven't updated since I got to Carhartt in 7 years, but I was like, where have I done this in the past? Where have I sort of always just kind of made stuff about things I love? And so I have a couple examples of my sort of pre-Carhartt life that I'll share with you. The first one was how I got one of my first assignments. That's my dad in the far lower left, Michael, if you didn't guess that already. He's a policeman. And one of the early things, a guy named Jelly Helm, who was a great creative director at Carhartt, I believe taught here at some point, is that right?
Yeah.
Jelly told me when I showed him this campaign, and he said, you know what I like about it? It's just the truth. He's like, all you did, so what we did is we went to the Chicago Marathon, and there's 40 of these executions. I'm just sharing a couple, but we just shot what a runner sees when he's on the course. What is he looking at? And, you know, so we shot all the characters who make up the race, and we put those on buses and billboards. And as a kid, you know, my dad was a policeman, and he would take me to parades, he would take me to marathons, and, you know, these gigs where he would just tell people, all right, let's keep it moving, folks. I remember he'd always say, when, you know, imagine like a family trying to cross the street, he'd have to wait till there was a break in the run, and he'd go, all right, keep it moving, or he'd, you know, it's just kind of crowd control. So, like, I just remembered he was one of those characters you sort of saw at the race. You know, the second one is me. You know, I got really into running at Nike. That's not me in the picture. I wouldn't show you that if that was me. That's another big Clydesdale guy. But when I was talking to this guy who was a runner, he's a really big guy, and he was like, I'm like, man, you really love running, don't you? And he's like, yeah, but I love roast beef sandwiches more. And I was like, that's a great line. I love running and roast beef sandwiches. And that was like, that's a classic Chicago, you know, beef head for you. Everyone in Chicago loves the Bears. I love the Bears. I'm running as hard as a rocker hits, is the line up there. You know, one of the neat things is you go through all the neighborhoods. You go through Greektown, you go through Little Italy. That's a guy that I used to go eat pasta with, who was the chef. And it just says, eat my pasta or else. So we just kind of drove around the course and looked for real things you would see. That was what I knew. I knew Chicago. So I loved this assignment. And probably the only reason why Kennedy let an account exec write it was because I argued no one was going to know it better than I was. So that was early on me sort of putting myself into what I made. So I went to Leo Burnett. It was actually called Arc Worldwide, one of those merger thingies. And this is my favorite idea that I've ever made. This won 3 Lions. It's really simple. So VERB was a program the Center for Disease Control created in the Clinton era. This is like 2002 to 2005 to get kids physically active. Obviously, youth obesity for the last 20 years has been a huge concern of ours. So they gave us a campaign to create ads to get kids active. So I'm like, isn't there something fundamentally wrong with the fact we're making TV ads to tell kids to play? Shouldn't we actually try and figure out ways to get them to frickin' play? So we created this thing called Verb Yellow Ball. So we made about 1 million of these, and we just threw them all over the country. We sent them to PE programs. We left them in just parks randomly. We created events, and we worked with the NFL and NBA, and had all these partners just to get this ball out there. So that it was very simple. You set on the ball, and play with this ball. 2, go to verbnow.com and enter the code below and tell us what you did with it. 3, pass it on to another kid. So we got to watch this ball move from Hawaii to Delaware. I mean, it was a great example. It was, kids just played with the ball and went online. This was like the original Fitbit. They would actually log what they did with it. And they had to do it. They had to go in and say, I played basketball, I played dodgeball. And one of the things I learned early, because the Center for Disease Control is very, you can imagine presenting to doctors. Like, go present to doctors and see what that's like. I mean, Jesus. You'll really miss like the worst client you ever had. Because they're so about the science, right? And so, yeah, their head, and so one of the things they told us was like, children, the really interesting thing about them, which I love, children are just very honest. Because our worry was like, because you got sort of certain prizes for the more you play. And we were like, yeah, but some kid's just going to go on there and just fake load this thing out. And I can tell you by the research we did, just how they entered it, things they said, just behaviors, they didn't. They actually truthfully talked about stuff they did. They created games, they spread this thing around. But that was, for me, one of the early things I think I learned about idea making was, and I say this to my team all the time, how do you put the brand in someone's hand? It's what we say a lot at Carhartt. Don't just think in TV spots and print ads. Like, how do you physically get them holding something that makes them think of you? So this has always been a really center of how I think about ideas. And I've also joked, the only job that I'm actually qualified for is creative director or 3rd grade PE teacher. So, life fulfilled. This was another one. There's some funny TV behind it, but I'll spare you with it. Gatorade came to us. Because of Verb, I got hired by Gatorade's agency, and they saw what we were doing to get kids active, and they're like, we want you to make these really serious tips from the pros. And they had Peyton Manning, Dwayne Wade, all these guys I love. And we were like, what kid wants to listen to like serious professional tips? If anyone here has ever been in a classroom or has kids, like, good luck. It's pretty difficult. So we created this whole campaign called Play Your Best, and it was about sort of really ridiculous things to help you work on, your game. And I'll show you that video at the end. So then it took me to Corona. Corona was a really interesting one for me to work on. They have such an interesting target. The more you learned about Corona and studied them, the people who drink Corona, and I'm going to just share with you a little bit of like how we got to Find Your Beach. When you went to like focus groups or things, they weren't the thing we kept hearing over and over again was like, they literally drink this thing to have a release from reality. And so the TV spots that are on Find Your Beach, they're almost like they should be illegal because we took you out of your world. The first one I did was about someone sitting on a plane and their brain has them in Mexico, but they're really on a plane. and then the person gives them the beer. So that's basically what we did. We were the first ones at Kramer Gasol to take where you were in reality and bring you somewhere else. And so it was a really interesting, just simple thing, that taught me, sometimes like the brands like this that are really, they've been around, they've been done so well. It was really, we were the first ones to ever push Corona off the beach. They actually never left the beach before. I mean, and obviously this stuff is installed on the beach. But when you look up the Find Your Beach TV campaign, the earlier stuff, unfortunately I'm not a huge fan of the later stuff, as all bitter creatives are when they're gone. But it was just an interesting one. I can tell you the one that is very me, that I still fight to this day. Log off, lime in. This is from like 8 or 9 years ago. I can't stand, and I think our youth is like that. I can't stand people who sit on their phones all the time. We're so disconnected from the real world. I mean, I wrote this bit when we all had Blackberries. Now I would say the same thing about Apple, and I can tell you when I'm at my worst, it's when my kids say to me, Dad, please get off your phone. Dad, please get off your phone. And so I've sort of become that guy that I hated when I was younger. I hated people that were always on their phone. And I think, just something I would say to students, not to like get in a segue, but we've had young creatives around us a lot lately and throughout my career. I gotta tell you, I constantly see creatives who are like on their phone, especially the younger ones, and older ones are too. That's bullshit. But guess what? Some of the older ones have already set their course. They are who they are. We have creatives from different agencies I work with come out. There's a group in New York that work for Mike Bennett and Anomaly. They're not. This is a different team. This is an old team. They'd come out to these meetings. I'd watch them sit on I would take them out, but we'd be out at like this incredible construction site, meet with a chance to meet real people, and here these people are with their head on their phone. I gotta tell you, like, people notice. The people that you're gonna work for notice that shit. If I could give you any advice, it's come in and keep your goddamn phone in your pocket. I think we all know it's a pretty good epidemic within our country. We're all really guilty of it. But I think that this idea of being more connected to the people around us and the ideas around us, it's so. I think it's a problem in the business world right now. So, not to get off on a tangent, but I know that came from a real truth of something that was really bothering me. Take it for what it's worth. Okay, so now we're at rule number 3. Never forget how you got here. So I'm going to show some videos at the end, but this is Von Miller and his family. If you don't know Von Miller, Super Bowl MVP, Dancing with the Stars, been on many Old Spice commercials. He's a really funny guy. Vaughn had been tracking us down for a couple of years because he just loves Carhartt. He grew up on a chicken farm in Texas. He grew up a hunter, an outdoorsman. His dad fixes like these giant industrial batteries. He's worn Carhartt his whole life. And he kept calling, not calling, it was like 1 or 2 times we'd get this message like, hey, Von Miller just wants you to do something with these guys, with him. And so I finally took the time to go out and meet him because it was exciting. Wouldn't want to meet him if he loved sports. And right before I met him, he called me and said, his agent called me and said, hey, Von just wants you to talk to, he said, before you guys meet, he just wants you to talk to his dad about who he is. And I was like, that's awesome. All right. So I called his dad, and we had this long talk, and I learned all these things about how Von was raised, where he grew up, and it became so informative to me. We just made a campaign about this that you can go look at if you just look at our Instagram about Labor Day, which was all about thanking those who got you there. And so when I went out and presented ideas to Vaughn, the first thing you learn about him is he's just really grateful. He's really grateful for his brothers, his parents. He's really grateful for his teammates. We were in the interview. He talked about. I started saying, well, let's just make a campaign where you thank people. So we literally made about 15 7-second spots where he thanks the military. He thanks teachers. He thanks farmers. They're real simple. They're just 7-second spots that just say, thanks for all the hard work you do. And then we targeted farmers. any young farmer from 18 to 30, we sent them that note from Von Miller saying thanks. I mean, creatively, they're not even, the execution, just like he bites a carrot, he's like, hey, farmers, I've eaten carrots since I was a kid, thanks, farmers. I mean, they're not creative, they're just statements. They're not anything that's going to win an award for the creativity of it. But the idea of really letting him thank all these people. He thanked the grounds crew at Denver, the guys who get the turf ready for the game. He thanked hunting guides, fishing guides, and then we just targeted all those people. And I can tell you, it was one of the most responsive campaigns we've ever had at Carhartt. To give you a couple examples of some metrics that were interesting to me. As you guys know, the average click-through rate in videos in Instagram and Facebook is like 0.3. These were hitting 5% engagement. People, and then responding to Carhartt. Our website on a weekend will have anywhere from something like 40 to 60,000 people will hit our website on a Saturday and Sunday. So the weekend of Labor Day, which you can imagine is a pretty boring weekend to get traffic to your website because everyone's hopefully out on a lake enjoying themselves, there was close to 100,000 people who came to the page just from the videos and were buying product and learning more about the brand. And even better for us, what Vaughn gave us really interestingly was different demographics. We had Hispanic guys coming, we had black guys coming, we had people who love the NFL, we had people who hate the NFL who called to tell us they hate us. You can't please everybody. We had women because he thanks his mom. We had it was a really neat targeted campaign, and most of those are on our Instagram. I would encourage you to go check them out. I didn't want to bore you with lots of stuff, but I'm probably right in the point of my career to make that campaign because I'm now very grateful for how I got here. I'm aware I work for one of the best brands in the world. I'm aware that I'm not making all this work on my own. There's really talented people over the last 7 years at Carhartt that I brought in to help me, where I can come in a room and toss out a nugget of this idea and watch them go make it better. I think a lot of what Carhartt's done for me is because I think I feel really good about where I'm in my career and really grateful. I've just started thinking about all these characters around us who have these jobs that they're just not appreciated for. And it's made me want to think about how do we think of ideas to thank the people around us who do these things that aren't necessarily the sexiest things in the world, but they're the things that keep the lights on, they're the things that keep this country running. So it's a really good time to be at this brand, for me and for the brand itself is, we're 130 years in and, we're up almost 35% this year. We're up 15% over our goals, so the brand is stronger than it's never been. But if you look at the videos I'm about to show you, it's not a lot about product innovation. It's a lot about stories that inspire people. It's a lot about, connecting with people and as a brand telling, we know you, we get exactly who you are. Because at our level, at the ad world, it's sort of your first job. We're the handshake. I got to rely on the point of sale, the salesman. I've got to rely on the website to sell the product through. We're sort of that first line of, here's who I am, get to meet me, get to come learn more about me. And so I'll show you some ways that we're doing that in a second. Again, I just want to keep reading. I want to show you where I put myself into stuff. If you look, so the first mission I had at Carhartt was give them a mission. It was a time where, when I got here 7 years ago, there was some leadership that didn't know which way should we go. Who do we chase? Do we go after everybody? Do we go younger? Do we go older? Do we go to the south? We're a very warm weather or cold weather brand, right? So now we start making products for the south. We started thinking about what occupations do we go after. And the biggest thing that, Tony Ambrosia, who's an ex-Nike client who brought me there, he's the chief brand officer. Him and I kind of figured this out with Mike Byrne from Anomaly. It was like, why do we have to be so much about work? Like, work in its truest sense. We can open this aperture a little bit bigger and talk about, instead of saying we're here for the worker. No, we build rugged products to serve and protect hardworking people. So what that does for me is it reminds the 90%, the 70% of people who buy us because they're farmers, they're ranchers, they're construction workers, that you are our core target and we are going after you. That's what we are lasered in, zero focused on. Now, if you're a guy who owns a tech firm and you like to build a treehouse with your kid in your extra time, I want to invite you in too. I don't want to tell you you can't come play with Carhartt because you don't look like a construction worker or a farmer. I want to get after people who what I call blue collar DNA. I'm this. These hands, my dad will tell you, have never fixed a thing. But I still love the brand. I love that I can wear it hiking and camping and the small garden projects that I like to do. So one of the things I learned when I got here was people were actually intimidated by Carhartt. People didn't think they had the right to wear Carhartt. And that was a wall that I wanted to break down. So I was like, look, let's just start looking at work. Glass blowers make great work. You know, they work hard all day. You know, when we started doing photo shoots, we started learning how craftsmen, especially women, work in really rugged conditions, and they do some amazing stuff. And so if you looked at our old mission, I don't know if it was really speaking to them. This sort of allowed us to start opening up the aperture and talking to other people. But we did it, you know, without losing a sense for who we are. So Carhartt is much more than a maker of workwear. We are a brand for hardworking people. We are the uniform for any man or woman who chooses to take on any rugged corner of the earth. These are just some posters we make. So you'll see that we're never going to get away from this guy. We're always going to talk squarely to this guy or woman. But you'll see in our videos that we're starting to go after it a little differently and a little more widely. Back to that verb yellow ball idea that you guys had, that all started from a ball and a tube that we'd sent to kids. I've always loved how to, and luckily with that won at Cannes wasn't best film, it won best direct mail piece. And so I've always been like, let's go after the direct mail piece. Nobody's really going after it. It's really hard to win best film. Direct mail piece you got a little better shot at it. So, because think about it, what do you get in your mail? You get bills and you get, stupid coupons, right? So when you do finally get something in the mail, you're like, shit, this isn't something I don't want to look at. So I love the mail. The mail is one of my favorite places to try and send stuff. So this year for Labor Day, we didn't want to just do a campaign about thanking people. We actually wanted to send just a gift. And we picked about 500 really influential people. If you guys are familiar, so here's 4 groups that we work with. So the FFA is the Future Farmers of America. We asked them, who are your 100 most influential kids who are doing really interesting things? Great, they gave us a list. We went to Team Rubicon, who goes into hurricanes and disasters. They're probably out all along this coast right now. I said, who are the 100 most hardworking people in yours? They gave us a list, we send it. Helmets to Hard Hats is another one that takes military guys and puts them into the trades. We sent those guys a box. So it was a really micro-targeted thing. We only made about 500 of them. But, and Skills USA, sorry, that's the last one. Skills USA, another organization that takes kids and teaches them to work with their hands. So it wasn't a lot, but it was really interesting. We got to see the ricochet effect of all these people randomly getting this big crate and opening it up, unboxing it on their social sites. And I won't bore you with the numbers of how we sort of measured it. It was very much a brand awareness play to us, but it was really neat to see these people share this on their influential spaces in Facebook and Instagram. I thought it had a lot more power than any ad could have ever done for us. So I really liked playing with other ways to put the brand in their hands. I know the beer was mentioned earlier. That was just such a no-brainer. We had our 125th anniversary, and we said, the brief was, hey, we're 125 years old, we're from Michigan. What can we do to remind people we're from Michigan? And so I was like, well, let's make a beer. And we emailed about 6 or 7 breweries. They all got back to us. We emailed Michigan breweries. because we found New Holland Brewery, who's a brand that really cares about how the beer is crafted. And we told a really neat story about it. And people always say, why would Carhartt make a beer? One, I like having our brand in beer aisles. That just seems to make easy sense for a guy to walk by and just think about Carhartt. But two, it allowed us to tell a story about the process of making beer. So if you think about where beer comes from, we talked about how I went and shot the farmers who made the hops. Then from there we went and shot the brewmasters who brewed the beer. And then that beer, again, all these people in Carhartt, right? So the farmers in Carhartt, the brewmasters in Carhartt, and there's a factory worker loading up the box. He's in Carhartt. Then that guy puts it on a truck who's in Carhartt. Then the truck delivers it to a bar where some guy at 5 o'clock comes in, or a woman, after work and hopefully orders a beer. So we really like that story, and we've been telling stories like that a lot, where you just start thinking of the circle of life of Carhartt. There's a poster on my wall that someone, a really great creative from Anomaly, Sheena Brady, wrote that said, if you look around, everything around you may have been built by someone wearing Carhartt. And I love that line. It sits on my wall for a reason. That it makes me think of this big, beautiful building we're in. There's a guy maybe in Carhartt who laid that brick. The guy built that. There's so many things around us that you start seeing when you start looking at, the world with sort of a 360 view. I mentioned these guys earlier because my brother had just got back from Iraq. He was waiting to get on the Chicago Police Department. The first thing I learned was our military are like while employment rates were at their highest about 5 years ago, if the employment rate was at a 9, ex-military's unemployment rate was at 17%. And that just sort of disgusted me, to be honest. You hear these people who've served our country and they can't find a job when they get back, and they've got all these amazing skills. So a friend of my brother's introduced me to this group called Helmets to Hard Hats, and that's all they do. They're a group that takes soldiers and tries to connect them with jobs in the trades and crafts when they're done, because they've got such great experience. So now that logo, which we redesigned from, that goes on everything we make, made in USA. So 10% of what we make at Carhartt is made in USA in Kentucky and Tennessee. While it's 10%, you might not think is a lot. The only people who make more clothing in America than us are the U.S. military and the U.S. Post Office. So, our 10% is still an enormous amount of product that we make. So that logo is now on the inside of any product we make that's made in USA. And on the tag, you'll learn that a percentage of all sales that are made in USA go to helping Helmets to Hard Hats. So that just, I think there might be a lot of questions about this later, like what's the difference between agency and client? To me, this is always one of my favorite ones. It's about what the Access card gives me to is the idea so way up front. What I've learned when you're at the agency, so many things have happened before this brief gets to you. So many decisions have been made. So many commitments have been made. I just get to see everything before it gets to anybody. I get to see where are we going, what do we want to do, so I can have that influence way upstream to say, hey, here's a group, if we're going to instead of hearing about this 2 years from now, I got to make an ad in 2 weeks about Helmets to Hard Hats. 2 years ago, I met the guys who were running this program. I met people in the program. I then introduced them to our product people. I then got the product team to commit to putting it inside the pants. I'm more happy that this logo's inside our pants than any ad I ever made. That's not an ad, that's just an idea that I had to see through. So that's, I think when people ask me all the time, what is the difference? I think it's that you just get to be a part of the idea and creation a little earlier. And that just helps. It helps a lot. So, I think this is my last of this slide. So that's this guy, Jason Momoa, and I'm the dork in the big helmet to the lower left. So for those of you who know him, he's kind of becoming this huge star right now, right? He was Khal Drago on Game of Thrones. He's Aquaman now. He's in this new Apple's show that's going to come out next year that's going to be really, really big. So he called me out of the blue about 4 years ago, and he was like, hey, I want to make something. I want to make a Carhartt film. I want to make your commercials. I didn't watch Game of Thrones at the time, and so I quickly IBD'd him, and he was on Baywatch for 10 years. And I was like, why is this guy from Baywatch telling me why he's the perfect guy to make Carhartt commercials? And I kind of tried to blow him off, and it didn't work. He's very persistent. He somehow got to me and was like, just meet me for one beer in Detroit. And so I did, and 10 minutes after you meet him, he's like 6'5". Every person in the world is staring at him because he's such a presence. You really realize he was a really down-to-earth, smart-ass, funny guy. And he's kind of become the Mike Byrne of the end of my career, my second half of my career. He's become this creative muse for me to create with. And we've now made about 7 TV spots together. We've made a film I'll show you guys here in a second. But what was really interesting about him is while people think he's this Hollywood heartthrob sensation, he's a kid who grew up in Iowa. He grew up on a pig farm. He grew up with family who worked construction. He grew up, his mom was an artist, so she was a painter. He just had some really blue-collar Midwest roots, and he knew exactly where he came from. No matter how big of a star he's becoming right now, and I'm getting to watch it as a friend of his, he's super grounded and down to earth. And it's funny because I take a lot of shit at Carhartt sometimes because they're like, oh, sometimes the sales guys will be like, oh yeah, you're the guy who gets to hang out with Von Miller and Jason Momoa. I gotta tell you, I hang out with them because the same reasons I told you about Mike Byrne earlier. They fuel me, they feed me with their creative energy and their humbleness. When you're like, when you see how humble these guys are and they're at such an elite level, it really makes you feel small, and I think it's important that we all try to feel small as we can. And so he's been sort of a really interesting relationship that I've gotten to form and make stuff at Carhartt. And I can tell you the biggest thing that we bonded on was because we both were guys who were traveling a lot, and we both had I have 3 kids, he has 2 young kids, and we're trying to figure out this thing of how do you be a dad and you're not there a lot. We both came from single parents. The dad I talk about, my mom didn't meet till I was 7. And so the more we talked about that, about what made us exist, that became the idea for our film that I'll show you here in a second. So I leave you with that. One of my favorite things I've gotten to create at Carhartt is this idea called Carhartt Handmade Films. We're right now starting to, I don't want to talk about a lot of it because it's not really out there yet, but the goal of mine is to turn us into an internal agency. Well, we already are an internal agency, but we're starting to make films so what happens is someone will call me and say, hey, I really liked your film. Who's your agency? Who's your production company? And I'm like, we are. And we're kind of flipping the script a little bit. It's becoming, I've presented this idea to the owners that we create our own entity and we start making films for other brands. And we've got a couple brands who've already paid us to do so. The logical one is, because we're Carhartt, anyone who partners with us, so I'll tell you how it even started. 3M Insulate, who is in all of our garments, needed to make an ad about how they're inside Carhartt. And I had to approve it. And it was okay. I was like, yeah, this is cool, go with it. You're putting your money towards it. So the woman came to me the next year and said, well, why am I paying this agency to make this when I could just pay you to make it? And I was like, that'd be great. So we're starting to try and build a model that's really never been done. And I'll be honest, we kind of have no idea how to do it. We're in the midst of figuring it out. But it's sort of our goal now to go, and we're talking with Guinness right now about something with them. It's going to be our goal to release 2 or 3 films a year for other brands that maybe it's a collaboration we're doing together, or maybe it's a brand that just wants our opinion because we are living in this space that they're interested about. So more to come on this, but what I've learned about being inside Carhartt is no different than what I've learned anywhere. If you want to try and make something happen, and you believe in it enough, you actually might get somewhere. Just because something doesn't exist doesn't mean you can't do it. And so, I'm intrigued by where this can take us. The 2 films we have released The film with Jason Momoa was Outside Magazine's top 3 films of the year last year. We just released a short, these are all shorts. We just did a short 5-minute film about a hunter who goes blind at age 40 and learns to hunt while blind. That's a great story. That just won the Breckenridge Film Fest, and it's on the Film Fest tour. So I think, as you guys know, there's a big space right now for content and making the right content that's the right size, the right length. And we really think we found this sweet spot of like how to tell a good 5 to 8 minute story without, with it feeling like you came here to watch the story. That it's brought to you by Carhartt should be of no difference. Someone said to me, "Well, you're just a brand telling stories. You don't get to tell stories." And I said, "That's bullshit. What is Star Wars? Think about Star Wars. How much shit do you buy from Star Wars after you see Star Wars? Like, why can't a Carhartt make a film? And if you buy Carhartt after, great. I mean, I think we have a perspective that all these companies who get, Paramount Pictures, who gets to decide what they think people should see this year. Why can't we look at the lens we see, the America we see at Carhartt, and say we want to tell films? So that's just something, this little sweet spot we're trying to figure out how to do it. Well, the last one, this is my son in Brazil, or not, Spain. Luckily for me, the beauty of having kids is you get to see another version of you, and it helps me stay young. My son does really stupid, funny things all the time, and he constantly amuses me. I would tell you that the thing that, I think I'm having those classic creative midlife crises that we all hit at 40. Can I still do this? Can I still be relevant? Go have kids. You'll figure it out. It is just, everything just repeats. It's a whole new wealth of inspiration. It's a whole new, just this little piece of clay you get to mold and watch. And so my kids definitely keep me reminding myself that it's okay to be stupid, because I definitely don't want to, I want to teach them the same ways that I tried to learn. And sometimes as a parent, you want to tell them to make all the smart, right decisions. And it's hard to say, no, go move to Oregon, smoke weed, and figure it out. It'll be fine. Luckily, he's 9, so we're not there yet. This was just something I read on someone's Instagram that I loved. I'm a wanderer, and the only way to find me is to look for me in the places I've never been. I thought actually about making this talk about this idea of finding the never been. And that's sort of where I'm trying to go with this Carhartt Handmade Films. It's never been done, and I'm just intrigued by trying to figure out how to do it, how to build a model that doesn't exist. And one of the things I think, back to being your guys' age and being in school, and you're at such a great place that I know is teaching you to chase these spaces that are never been done. And I just think it's just so important that that you're in this bubble right now to learn how to go make the never been done. Because guess what? You're going to get in the ad world, and wherever world, a company, and you got 2 weeks, and you're just going to a lot of times have to make a lot of shit that's been done, and you're going to be frustrated by that. But I think if you start building yourself as a person who believes I will only do the never been done, you don't let those things happen. You don't go work at those places. You don't take those jobs. You guys have the chance right now, more than me, more than anyone, to control your career. And I think you got to guard that with your life. If you're someone who believes in making the never been done, man, you really got to think about that these next couple of years, who you're working for. Because many will say that they want to go after the never been done, but that doesn't mean they do. And I can tell you, I have sort of 3 worlds of my career. I'm very spoiled because I got to start at Wyden, where they definitely taught us this. And I moved back to, so that was my first 4 or 5 years. Then I went back to Chicago, my hometown, which I loved, and I bounced around the agency scene in Chicago. And I really struggled there because nobody wanted to do, they said they wanted to do the never been done, but they just really didn't. They wanted to do familiar stuff. They wanted to be safe. They didn't want to be stupid. And Carhartt's now this next third chapter of my career where I have an owner who tells me, Brian, let's go do the Never Been Done. I have, a leader who tells me to go do the Never Been Done. And I really realized I can't work for anyone who isn't that way. I was pretty miserable in my middle years in Chicago. And I'm glad I was. And I think, you know what, if you start out and your first 5 years suck, good. Learn what suck feels like. Because it makes, when it feels good, really, really all that much better. You're not lost if you guys, a lot of you are going to have to take jobs that are going to pay the bills. There's nothing wrong with that. But as long as you know that you got to get out of that place and find the place you're looking for, if this is what you believe in, then you're going to be okay. I always say that you sort of have to lose to win. And I definitely have lost many times to get to this place. That's why the line I have with Corona, you win some, you win some, that's idyllic, that's a lie. We all win and lose. Like on the Corona beach, everybody wins. That's where like selling beer becomes a little fake sometimes. It's just not true. So lastly, I've got some, I think that's it. I'm going to show you just some quick videos. And are we doing okay? Am I boring the shit out of you guys, or are you all right?
Yeah, that's good.
I'll give you a little commentary after watching. This is one of the first spots I made a car. So here's a little good product story about that one for you as you think about ideas. So 2011 is when I had to launch the first Carhartt t-shirt. Think of it, we weren't known for t-shirts at that time. We were just known for really overalls, jackets. We were known for being a cold weather brand. So the sales team comes out and they have all the buyers. They're called partnership meetings. You invited the Dick's, the Cabela's, the Ace Hardware, anywhere there's 5,000 people who sell Carhartt across the country. So all the buyers come in, and I've got to put together like a little mini campaign to get them excited about us having a t-shirt. And they had 4 or 5, because I was late, we weren't ready to get this shown. The first 4 or 5 partnership meetings went really poorly, because there was no campaign to go with selling this t-shirt. The sales guys were just saying, hey, this is new, I'm actually wearing it for us. This is a dry fit. Think of your classic Nike Under Armour. This is just a moisture wicking shirt, right? So every buyer kept coming in and going, why would I buy this shirt? I've got 3 sports brands, Nike, Adidas and Reebok and Patagonia. They've been making this material for 10 years. You guys are like, you're like the 17th brand to come in with a lightweight t-shirt. Like there's no point of difference for you. And in fairness, these buyers weren't wrong. The shirts, we've tested them. They could go back and forth either way. But we had one advantage that the sports brands didn't. We tested, so I went and met with the product team. We were testing our shirts for 12-hour workdays. The sports brands were testing them for 90 minutes of tennis, right? And so they probably could have tested for 12 hours and it would have done fine, but they weren't. We were testing for 12 hours. So the bottom line is, it's the same shirt, but we just said, let's reframe the conversation. Why are you buying a shirt that was built for 90 minutes when your day is 12 hours? So all of a sudden, in partnership meetings, they see this campaign And they're like, holy shit, you have a point of difference. You're a work shirt. You're not a dry fit shirt. You're not a sports shirt. And so today, the Forest line is $125 million in business for Carhartt. It's in almost everything we make. So it was the same product. We just changed the conversation about it. We just pivoted and took a stance that said, no, we've got, this is better. And Anomaly, I give a lot of credit for. Mike Byrne was the first guy I called when I told him this insight, and he helped me bring that to life. So this is the first spot I did with Jason Momoa. So, kind of interesting story here. One of the things we wanted to do because we were working with Jason was we knew how hot he was because of being in Justice League and Aquaman at the time. And so this is something I learned. We started pitching everyone that we've got this Hollywood guy directing our spots. And I knew we were going all over the country to these really beautiful, interesting places to film this story of people, that's a real search and rescue team from Colorado. And so I called a guy from Outside Magazine and said, a friend could put me in touch with a writer there. And I just said, just come on our shoot. I want you just to see how we film. And he wrote a beautiful story about us. He wrote a story about how Carhartt only works with real people. He wrote a story in depth about who Jason Momoa really was as a person and about his passions. And so, now think about it, 2 months before our commercials already been aired, people are already talking about the making of it. So I think one of the things I've learned from watching so many makers and filming them is the making process is probably more exciting sometimes than the end process. And it took me a long time in my career to realize how much making it is much of a joy to me. In fact, it's probably more of a joy to me. So I think as you guys think about your ideas, don't forget about how much the process of whatever your idea is can be just as interesting as the outcome. And can probably, in the end, I can tell you we got probably more press from him directing the spot in Outside Magazine than we got from the spot. Then I don't need the spot, the commercial is the commercial. It did great, it performed, I'm fine with that. But now I had people talking about it 3 months going into it. We talk a lot about at Carhartt, talk when people are listening. We've gotten really good over the last 2 years of really leaning into when does someone want to hear from Carhartt? When do we have a right to talk to you? And we hadn't talked to women on a really mass level yet. In fairness, our product just wasn't there. We had fit issues, we had style issues. A couple of years ago, I think once they started looking at the real women we were shooting, they were like, man, our products, it's just, the fit's off, things are off. We started, the advertising team started introducing the product team to more real people who wore their stuff. And to their credit, they looked at what these women were doing and really started refining our line and getting back to better colors. And so we finally felt bullish last year and said, let's finally make a statement about women. And it's like, I don't know about anyone here in this room, but I come from a really strong, stubborn mom who was a single mom, who was a waitress, who threw her shoe at me when she was mad at me, who could somehow figure out how to get everything done for us my whole life. And so it was very easy for me to suggest, let's make an awesome Mother's Day spot.
Today in school, we learned about Rosie the Riveter. My teacher said she could build or fix anything. They said she could take on the world.
So the voice is my son. The only reason he made the cut was because when we wrote this, we didn't think we needed copy for it. And we got done with it. We were just gonna have it end in All Hell Mom. And with the Rosie the Riveter thing, and we just felt like we needed to say more. So we quickly sat down and wrote a script, and I had him record it in my garage, just because I wanted to hear a little kid's perspective of it. But have a kid read it talking about his mom, because if you have kids, they're like impossible to get anything out of them from what happened at school. But once in a while, I'll go, what did you learn at school today? And he'll tell me I learned about MLK. I learned about Rosie the Riveter. Once in a while, they'll tell me something. So I was like, maybe you would come home and do that. So that helped the arc. But then I was like, well, I don't want to. So anyway, we did it. We put his voice on it, and I showed it just as a scratch and said, I'm not going to be that D-bag creative who puts his kid in ads. This one I didn't really want to, but luckily for me, everybody convinced me to keep it. So that was kind of a really special one to make in the end. And I didn't have to buy a Mother's Day present.
Since when did Labor Day become a celebration of 70% off mattress sales? Shouldn't Labor Day be about everyone out there laboring? You bet it should. This day was founded in 1885 to pay tribute to the American worker. The men and women who make sure that the rest of us have the basic human needs of food, clothing, shelter, and 7,600 channels of high-def TV. So instead of whining the next time roadworks screwing up traffic, think about the guy busting his hump in 100-something degree heat, and the mechanic keeping your car on the road so you can get away this long holiday weekend. You still with me? Good. Now let's start saying thanks, shall we? Thank a farmer, thank a rancher, thank a sheepdog. And when someone, please thank whoever taught this little girl to do that. Thank someone who builds. Thank someone who breaks. Thank this engineer for keeping your hotel room cozy. Thank the groundskeeper for keeping the grass green. Speaking of labor, how about we thank the doctors and nurses who help women who are in labor? Better yet, thank every mom who ever went through labor. Like horseshoes? Thank this guy. Like beer? Thank him. Her too. So before you bite into that juicy burger this Labor Day weekend, thank the cook. No, thank the butcher. No, thank the cowboy who raised the cattle in the first place. Because these people right here are what Labor Day is all about.
This one, I think it's worth showing for a couple reasons. One, we just started getting into shooting tintypes. I did this almost as a test. I wanted to start mixing medias. I want to, if you don't know what tintypes are, it's a form of camera from 1880. Kind of like think of old Civil War ads, people. So yeah, they had ads to sell you, I imagine. Exactly. One of the things we've learned is with Carhartt is there's just such great people who love and wear us, and I really want to keep making them the star of who we are. I think the term is called micro-influencers, right? So the idea of a micro-influencer is all these great characters out on Instagram and Facebook, either create content with them, for them, or let them make it themselves, but do it authentically. And so when we met Vaughn, you learned all these things about who he was, and he really wanted people to understand who he was. And so this whole camp, there's many ads we made out of this, but this was the intro that we had him release from his site to say, this is who I am and why I'm Vaughn Miller.